Hello everybody! So today we're going to be working on our Andy Warhol inspired printmaking project. So for this assignment you're going to need a foam printing plate, a white piece of scrap paper for sketches, a pencil, water-based markers, a wet or damp sponge, and finally some colored scrap papers that are about the same size as your plate. Let's get started. All right, first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on our pop art image design. So we could take our pencil and just start carving right into the plate, but the thing with the foam plate is once you carve into it, it is permanent. You can't fix it, you can't erase it, you can't do anything about it. So instead of just jumping into that, I'm going to take my foam plate on the scrap paper and I'm going to trace around it 2 times. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I have a template to show me how big of a space I have to work with. And it also gives me a chance to come up with a couple different design ideas before I commit to tracing it onto my template. So I'm trying to create an image that reminds me of an Andy Warhol type of thing. So it could be almost anything. Andy Warhol focused on pop art, and pop art has to do with using imagery from popular culture. So it could be a cartoon character, it could be a product that I love to eat or drink, like he did a lot of Campbell soup cans or Coca-Cola bottles. You could also do just generic things like a hamburger or a banana. Those are some other things that he focused on. So come up with a couple ideas and then we'll talk about what we're going to do with how we're going to transfer it to the plate. Okay, so here are the 2 drawings I came up with. I did a donut on one side and I decided to put a little bit of a tilt just to make it a little bit more fun and interesting. And the other side I did a Coca-Cola bottle, something that is very popular and easily recognizable by everyone. Now you don't have to come up with 2 ideas. I chose to come up with 2 ideas just so I had options, but if you have one idea and you know exactly what you want to do, go for it, do it, and just move on to the next step. But if you have more than one idea, feel free to do them on this side. You can even flip it over, do more on the other side, or even get another sheet of paper. One thing I wanted to bring up to you guys is that if you choose to do any words in your picture, you are going to have to do an extra step before you transfer this to your plate. Anything you do on your plate is going to actually come out backwards when you make a print. So if I put the words as they are on my plate, make a print, it's going to be backwards. So if you're doing a picture with words in it, you're going to need to cut it out and separate it, and you're actually going to need to flip your paper over and hold it up either to a window or to some sort of light source. In this case, I'm using my phone so you can see that when you look through it, you can see the words are backwards. And what you're going to have to do is trace over it this way so you can see the words backwards as they should be. Okay, so what I just did was I leaned against my light and I retraced the letters as I saw them backwards. And the reason why I did that, like I said before, is if I draw this way on my plate, it will look correct this way, but when I make a print, this is how it'll come out. It'll come out looking backwards and crazy. So if you want it to actually look like this, you're going to have to first trace your letters like I just showed you, and then when you are drawing on your plate, you're going to have to make sure your letters are backwards instead of forwards. If that seems too hard and complicated, I would encourage you to stay away from any words and instead just do the imagery. All right, let's talk about the next step. Once you've decided which image you want to do for your final project, you are going to do one of two things. You're either going to look at your picture and try to redraw it and recreate it exactly on here as best you can, but keeping in mind that since I can't erase this, I'm going to do my second option, which is I'm actually going to tape this to my plate. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut off two ends, so one side and the other side. Notice that I did not cut off the ends here. I did that so that I would have something to tape it to. So instead I'm going to fold on these lines and I'm going to wrap it around my plate and I can tape it on either side, or I can just simply lean it like this. And I can go right over it and push down. I'm going to take my pencil again, I'm going to push down onto my drawing that I did, and it's going to feel and look like I'm tearing the paper, which I probably am because I'm pushing down to try to transfer the line design from the paper onto my foam plate. And I'm going to do this with all of the shapes that are in here. Don't worry if you hear that tearing sound, don't panic, it's okay. It's going to be all right. You're not going to ruin your project. This part, you definitely want to make sure when you do this that you're not using a super sharp pencil. If you use a super sharp pencil, it is going to probably tear too deeply, and then you might have a little bit of an issue where you are going to cut right through everything, and that wouldn't be too good. But a dull pencil, like what I have right here, is going to work just fine. And I'm going to keep going until I've gotten everything that I need to retraced and redrawn again onto my plate. When I think I'm done, I'm going to peel the paper off and check and make sure I can see my design. So you can see that there's a little imprint of my design that went through the paper onto the foam plate, and it's come out exactly the way I drew it on here. Now, if I can see my design really well, I can get rid of this paper and continue with my next step. If I can't see it very well, instead of taking my paper off, I'm going to want to just lay it back on and push a little bit harder. Once you're at this step, you are going to want to go over your lines one final time just to make sure they are really deep and obvious. We don't want to press so hard that they go completely through the plate, but we want to press deep enough so that these lines, when you rub it with your hands, you can feel the texture of those lines really clearly. If it feels mostly smooth, then that's a sign that it's not quite deep enough. I need at this point are the sponge, the markers, and my colored paper. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to pick just one color and cover the entire thing up. If you want to do more than one, maybe 2 or 3, that's fine, but I'm actually going to just take one color, any color you want, and I'm going to take the cap and I'm just going to go right on top of everything. I'm bringing the entire plate with my ink. And what you're going to see is going to happen is that the ink is going to start pooling together a little bit and breaking up and kind of looking very wet and shiny still, and it is. So if I was to touch this with my finger, I'm going to get ink all over my finger, so you want to be careful that you are trying not to touch it too much. Anywhere that I carved is going to stay white, and that's fine. That's what we want because we want to be able to see the outline of our design. So don't try to sit here and color inside the lines. I mean, you totally could, but it's going to literally do nothing. It's not going to help anything. It's not going to show up. Anything that's carved in is going to stay white, and anything that is flat is going to show up when we make our print. So I'm going to continue to fill this in. I'm using the side of my marker because the side of my marker is going to give me more surface area so I can get things done quicker. And now I'm ready to make a print. I'm going to pick a colored paper that is a little bit lighter since I'm using a darker print. I want to pick something that I think it'll show up well on. And I think I'm going to go with this sort of pale green color. I think that'll look cool and interesting. And when I'm ready to make my print, I'm going to take my wet sponge. And this step's kind of important. You want to squeeze that sponge out so that any excess water stays at the bottom of your cup. And I'm going to wet the surface of my paper. And I want it to feel damp to the touch when I put my hand on it, but I don't want it to be so wet. So you don't want puddles of water on here. That is not going to look very good, and you don't want to over wet it because it will pill up and get gross. Now I'm going to flip my paper over, put it on top of this paper and rub it. Make sure you do this step pretty quickly so that when you are doing this, you're not letting that paper dry out before you're ready to make a print. And then after pushing and trying to make sure that I have an even print here, I'm going to peel up my stamp and see the cool design that left underneath. After you've made one print, if you're satisfied with it and you can see your image really well, you're going to set this aside and you are going to repeat the process with a different color and a different colored paper. So let's keep going until we've made 4 prints total. 4 prints that we're happy and that we like the results of. Let's go. have 4 prints that you're satisfied with, that you think came out clear and nice, you like the color combinations, then you need to let them dry before we move on to our last step, which is going to involve this black paper, a pair of scissors, and a glue stick. Now that your prints have had a chance to dry, you are going to get your black paper, your scissors, and your glue stick, and you are going to get ready to place them onto there. Now first we want to decide which colors seem to match best with each other. If you have a preference what order you put things in, how you want to pair them up. Once you've decided where you're going to put everything, we're going to get these, and we're actually going to do something you might find a little bit unexpected. We're going to cut out our stamped image here. So I'm actually going to take my scissors and I'm going to dive into this out and set it aside, and then glue back in place the background piece. Try to get it right into the corner of your paper, of your black paper, so that everything's just lined up really neat. Once you've cut out your donuts and you've glued down the backgrounds back in place, make sure that you've gotten all of the little corners, that there's nothing that's peeking up or becoming unglued again. Just add a little bit more glue to it if that's the case, and press down. I also find flipping over your paper and rubbing it from this direction can be really great too, to help flatten things out. Now the last step is to glue our donuts in place, but instead of doing what you might think, which is like just stick another donut in another color, which you totally could do, I'm actually going to take a different colored donut that doesn't go in that spot, And I'm going to, instead of putting it right back in exactly the hole that it came from, I'm going to have it glued down off center. The reason why I'm doing that is I want to leave this black space here, and that's going to make it look a little bit like there's a shadow behind it, which is very similar to what sort of Andy Warhol would have done in a lot of his prints, was leave these black little areas. But if you the look of literally putting it right on top of it, that's also fine too. And that's what I'm going to do next. There you have it, our finished Andy Warhol inspired printmaking project. 4 different prints, 4 different color combinations, and I on purpose left that little black gap to create sort of a shadow look to my donut. Remember, you can have that shadow or you can set it in perfectly. That's also acceptable. If you guys had fun making with me, I definitely enjoyed working in this material with these different color combinations. I absolutely cannot wait to see what pop art images you decided to do, what you decided to use for your colors, and how you decided to arrange it together. Fun!